Well, welcome to the Bucky call for July 3rd, I think it roughly is. And we're having all sorts of events happening. So we're going to go for it with those who are here. So I'm all excited. Normally, Joe's going to conduct tonight's meeting. So I'm going to tell you how I'm feeling and I'll turn it over. And Joe, I better make you a co-host.
Yes.
All right, good. I better do that before. Oh, we're already rolling. So, okay. So I'm feeling pretty good tonight. I have a lot going on. I'm traveling in a car, so I'm going to be listening in on the phone and probably won't be responding much. But if this book gets me cranked up, I will jump in. This book is a real practical book where Bucky's talking about human beings either wiping themselves out or suddenly starting to work together, and that's kind of cool. So I'm looking forward to see what comes out of this book. Julian, how are you feeling, and what do you expect to get out of today's meeting?
Thank you, Steve. Well, I'm feeling good to be able to join today. I have been struggling to join previous calls, like different stuff coming up. But I think today having the opportunity to challenge myself and also get close to this context where we can learn these new things that we are, I believe always I am amazed by something that we discover in this exercise that we're doing. So I expect that maybe today I'm going to learn something new, also to catch up. So that's how that's what I expect today. So why don't you go, Manu, and tell us how do you feel and what do you expect from this call?
I feel a little bit frustrated by technology here. I'm challenges. Nonetheless, I feel good. And I'm in a disposition to exchange and then to continue on this book and on the journey on which we have in order to understand general principles and their applications and see how design can be really become understandable and applicable to in our context. That's what I expect. Joe, how do you feel? What do you expect?
I actually got a pretty intense headache this evening, but I'm glad to be here. And we got quite a bit of a storm going on where I am. So hopefully we don't lose power. I don't think we will. But I'm looking forward though to diving into this text. It's one a little bit more of a practical text, as Stephen mentioned, of Bucky, and I think it's going to be interesting to see where it takes us. So yeah, no, I'm looking forward to tonight's call, and I'm ready to get started.
Cool.
So
pass it down to Steve.
Steve actually already went, so
yeah, it's probably up to you, Joe. So
okay,
roll it, and I'm going to be listening in the background.
Well, I can go ahead and start reading, and if anybody, feel free to stop me if you have any comments or questions during the meeting, and we can kind of go from there. Okay, we'll start with the top, page 10. Utopian or Oblivion. A third reason is that most scientists operate exclusively on a subjective basis. As pure scientists, they also operate non-conceptually. Most of the objective technologists or applied scientists are specialists and are unaware of the comprehensively integrated significance to society of the tasks they perform. I'm going to stop right here. I think that this is actually pretty interesting because he's pretty much speaking about the problem of over specialization, and that we've kind of see, and I kind of see this in scientists quite a bit where I work, is that they actually focus far too narrowly on what their one area and one job is, and they don't necessarily look at the whole, and it ends up being highly problematic for many of the engineers that I work with. That's just some of my thoughts. Does anybody else have any comments?
I want to say that I think that Bucky's use of the word conceptual and as juxtaposed to subjective, they are subjective. In other words, they're doing everything from their own personal point of view. Right. And evidently that means non-conceptual, which is more embracing, more of a generalist kind of way. And I assume that because he says that scientists are subjective, that he means that they are not conceptual, and maybe they're not objective either. That somehow the subjectivity, you're gonna have to look. Let me see. I can let that person in. That conceptual. In other words, he's using the words kind of uniquely here, and I just want to point that out. If you guys want to talk about it, I'm driving, so I'll be quiet.
Say again a word, Steve. I didn't hear you properly. My technology this morning not good. Where is it going to?
I think he went on mute.
So what word was he talking about?
He was talking about conceptually.
Yes.
I was talking about, we talked about subjective. I was talking about subjective and conceptual as opposed to general and objective.
Oh, we got a little bit of feedback there, Manu. There we go. You there, Manu?
Can you hear me?
There we are. That's the old Manu.
That's our menu.
I was having.
That's our Manu.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Shall we continue?
Yes.
Okay. A fourth reason is that world society is frustrated by the communication barriers between the many languages of mankind. For the foregoing reasons, there are only a few humans whose experience and operative faculties permit and inspire them to inform society regarding the significance of the evolutionary trending of mankind's now potential physical and economic success. What could be done up to now has been done in a big way as a consequence of man's access to the vast energy wealth of the universe, discovered by purely operating scientists, has not been determined by the technologists, but by their economic masters who see only the immediate high profits in, for instance, the exploitability of the fossil fuels or savings account energy wealth. In the most wholesale manner through national governments' commitments, most swiftly realizable in anticipation of emergencies of total war. Science and technology operate economically and socially only as slaves of the most powerfully short-sighted cashiers of humanity's needs and weaknesses. The latter see less profit in organizing the business of humanity to survive on the energy income of the environment.
I'd like to comment there.
Sure.
One thing that will be when we talk about evolutionary trending. I mean, if Bucky were alive today and see how the word trending is so commonplace in all of our social media, what is trending, right? It's like, it doesn't matter what's valid, it doesn't matter what's true, it doesn't matter, it's what's trending. And what's amazing is, in this economy, this environment, because he talks about it being controlled by the profiteers, that people actually get paid for trending,
Right.
even when it's total BS. I mean, all you have to do is open up a YouTube channel and put some cat doing a dance on there, and
Right.
they'll pay you for it. And there's absolutely no value for human evolution, for for any kind of personal fulfillment. It's trending has been capitalized, and it's ridiculous. So he's talking about, of course, the corporations running the fuel industry, the coal
Right.
industry, and how those people have hired scientists to create disinformation. And in fact, people are finding out that corporations knew their data was screwed up and hid it, and created more data to create more confusion. So here's Bucky in 1965. This is like not long after Eisenhower, who said, be careful of the military industrial complex, right? After Eisenhower's like 56 or something like that, right? And so then here comes Bucky less than 10 years later, and Bucky would roll over in his grave to find out that trending, you can actually profit from trending regardless of any thread of value in your communication. I was listening to those words and I just blew my mind. I mean, it's beyond corporate control. It's imbeciles in control. It's narcissists in control. And that trending gives people credibility. So it doesn't matter if you really know your subject, it just matters if you're trending in the subject. Okay, I rest my case.
Comments or questions?
I do have a comment.
Please.
And I think that when you, Joe, was reading explorability of the fossil fuels or savings account, energy wealth, my mind come to a concept that I heard recently, that is extractivism. So there's this economic concept of seeing all the economy around a country being extractivist. And I realized that the easiest way to understand extractivism is when you think of what you have under your feet and how you can make the most out of that. So that's why we can take resources from below our feet. So that's food, that's wood, that is coal, that is petroleum, and all of that is easy to understand. Like, yeah, we're extracting that and selling that to in order to get money, right? And then this guy starts to explain that this also happens in the financial world. Like, there's the same extractivism that is happening in Colombia, where you can see that the financial systems and the biggest financial companies want to extract the most out of people and the most out of each transaction. And so here in Colombia, interest rates for credits are really high. They are around 30% effective annually, and that's like normal, and savings accounts don't pay like almost nothing. And I joined these two ideas, like, okay, so the financial system or the people behind the financial system interested into extracting the most out of the savings accounts of people and of credits and of debt. They want to take the most they can by the law, like what is the thing that I can do. And right now reading this, it's like, my God, really is someone else telling joining those two ideas, like fossil fuels and savings account energy wealth. Like we can see extractivism in many things, like not only those two things, and like not only science and technology, as he said, as Bucky says, are like the slaves, but I think that many other stuff is falling into the same point of view, like falling into that slave position for that economic game. Big question to know if that is something that, if that profit that we're getting from that short side profit, if that makes sense, right? That's the question I think Bucky is telling.
Yeah, I mean,
think,
oh, go ahead.
can I, or Joe, you want to go first?
No, you can go ahead, Manu. You can go.
Okay, I was just going to see if you see my comment in the extractivism. It is a linear thought.
Right.
It doesn't recognize cycles. And really coming to your comment on interest rate and finance in reality, what was it meant to be? What is the fundamental role? What was the fundamental role of finance? It was to oil exchange.
Create a medium where you can interchange.
Yeah, it was to facilitate exchange. Now, when we observe finance today, what does it become? It's become a beast of itself, right?
It has become what? Sorry?
A beast of itself.
A beast of itself.
A beast of itself. Okay, I haven't heard that before.
Well, it's just a word, an expression that I'm using here. But what it means is that finance has detached from the real economy.
Right.
And is leveraging and leveraging and leveraging. And is using the power of fiat to impose a theft on the real economy that is called inflation. So what is the reality is that the rate of inflation does no more, or the rate of interest, or whatever that they call it, does no more reflect the returns of a real exchange. You understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I think so, Manu.
So it's no more. Bucky, yeah, Bucky was always in the cycles of a different constituent of our environment.
Right.
Whether you talk about steel, you talk about grain, you talk about energy, in whatever form, there was always a cycle that you have to recognize and try to accommodate the most possible in your design for your design to be not only anti-entropic, but also to be regenerative, is recognizing that. And that to me is a big deal.
To reaffirm what Manu is saying, the idea of creating stock and having a company is that you take somebody with a good idea and you get a bunch of people around who have a bunch of money and they fund the good idea. And there's nothing wrong with having a company and having stockholders. That's how you make progress. But the stock market has become, as Manu was saying, I think in his own words, the stock market itself has just become a game in and of itself. And the stock market is the tail that's wagging the dog. I'm traveling right now with a buddy of mine who's a financial planner, and we were just talking before this call how if a lender is clever they can loan money at a higher, at 1% or a 0.5% rate higher than anybody else, because they do marketing or do some special hype. They can then go out, take that loan and sell it on the market, on the secondary market, and make tons of money on a secondary market. To Manu's point, financing, which is supposed to be the idea of getting behind a good idea and funding good ideas, has turned into a demon, a beast in and of itself. It's a dragon, and it's running our world today. So that's to Manu's point, I believe. I think I'm totally agreeing there.
All right. I had just one interesting comment that I thought about back when Kelly was one of our first calls. And I remember him saying, and it's something similar to what Manu was saying with extractivism being linear versus cyclical, that when the need to bail out the banks in 2008, that we didn't let them just die, like it, and where something needed to happen but we bailed them out, we kept them alive, like as if it were some kind of linear process that they had to stay in business, as opposed to letting them go through like a cycle where, essentially we started with something else, with a different way of actually doing business and seeing what happens. I mean, it's hard to say if you should have let the banks go under or not, but it certainly posed a lot of moral complications when you're talking about people taking risk and not necessarily have to pay the long-term consequences for their actions, and that is short-term thinking, I think, as well.
Well, let's first acknowledge John here. Welcome, John.
Hi, John.
And,
yes, forgive me for not welcoming you, John.
That's all right.
Yes, let's just roll with the idea here. And the idea is this one. In 2008, what you call bailout, the bailout money scarcely found its way into the real economy.
Yes.
It was basically a bunch of toxic liabilities that bank had, and then resources or financial resources were injected into bank, and bank take that to inflate their balance sheet, right? And
That's
come
right.
up with a ratio to say that we have fresh money. This is it. And then therefore our balance sheet is better. We can continue the game as it was before with the same rule, right? But not only the same rule, is that they have been put in a position where they are so powerful and the real economy has been choked to a point where it's so weak today. And that's why you have disparities all over the world, in that people consume in most advanced countries much more than they produce.
Yes.
And this is really practical to me. I mean, being in what's the so-called emerging countries is very, very practical. It's not something that is just philosophical or something that we're feeling it every day. Every day.
Excellent.
Maybe John, you have a comment on this?
Yes, I do actually. I feel great concern because I deal with the banks and I deal with the consequences. I've borrowed lots of money, and in fact, I went out late last year because the bank was mucking me around. They don't really want to lend you money unless you clearly don't need it. And I wanted it for a business proposition to acquire some commercial property. So in the end, I went to somebody I know whose business is money lending. There were no delays, no complications. He knows me and trusts me. So he lent me the money immediately. And I'm paying a little more than I would to the bank, but it was very simple. It enabled me to acquire the property I wanted to acquire. What concerns me is that with the 2008 bailout, it was the poor people who lost their money, lost their houses. Most of those who are responsible for creating the problem faced no consequences. The government bailout just enabled them to keep going and repeating the sort of thing. And what we're seeing now, if you take Australia as an example, let's say you're a young couple, because interest rates were so low for so long, let's say you saved $200,000, 5 years, hard work, both working, saving hard, you save $200,000. You put that down as a deposit on $1 million property, which is what it costs you to get a reasonable home in Sydney or Melbourne, the big cities. So you've got the 20% equity. So the bank lent you the 800,000 because you had good jobs and incomes. But now with values falling, interest rates going up, values in the big cities in Australia are rapidly coming down. The risk is that in a year, you may be forced to sell that property. And the risk is that it'll be worth 800,000, not $1 million. So the bank will get enough back to pay them back, but you'll have lost that $200,000 you worked for 5 years to save. And I just think that's cruel. The reason is that the banks and the governments work together. When the government wants to stimulate economic activity, they encourage the banks to lend money. And the banks will then lend young couples that more than they really should be borrowing, but they're relying on the fact they're only going to pay 2.5% to 3% interest on the home loan. When the interest rate on the home loan hits 5 or 6%, they can't afford it. I saw some figures in this weekend's Weekend Financial Review. I think if you've got a $500,000 mortgage, they were predicting the way interest rates are going, your mortgage payments are going to increase by $1,000 a month.
Wow.
And I think if you had a $750,000 or $1 million mortgage, your repayments are going to increase by $1,500 to $2,000 a month. Now, if you've struggled and stretched yourself to buy that property, it's going to be a repeat. It may take a bit longer, may take the next 2 years, but I think there's a real risk that a lot of young people who've worked hard and been encouraged to borrow more than they should have, the bank should have said, no, you can't borrow more than the amount that, the repayments are less than 30% of your income.
Right.
What happens if either of them loses a job? What happens if she becomes pregnant and has a baby? It's just, and then they lose everything. They lose that money they've saved for the deposit. I just think it's criminal. And I think it's collusion between the banks and the government without real regard for the long-term financial well-being of people. So yeah, it really concerns me.
Well, it has to do a lot what you say with where does those resources that are injected or printed, where are they going to? They are going into assets, meaning that they are not moving. So you have what I call the conundrum of affordability and low interest rate, in that the prices of asset goes up, it becomes unaffordable to the latest coming. So the full currency effect is playing, and then you're basically playing out of the economy. When you say it's unaffordable, I mean, you make it a young couple. These are the vital part of what we're saying to borrow. It means that all their savings has been consumed by this greedy generation of ours. And it's just terrible. All of that spawned off the fact that the thinking was linear instead of being a thinking that is radial.
Right.
I want to share this because to go along with what John said and what everybody's been talking about here, this bailout came in 2008, saved the banks, and then real estate, of course, was crashed out. People lost their homes. Now, amazing things started happening because the hedge funds, which should have gone out of business, were now saved and rescued with all this TARP money. Those hedge funds started buying homes under $500,000 in the US. The investors who were out there to buying homes and rehabbing homes and creating value in America, the hedge funds started to compete with them and have sucked up all that market. So right now in America, there's a shortage of homes under $500,000 and the prices are driven up just amazingly high. Now, here's what's interesting. In Provo, a city right by mine, there's a 200 home development by, I wish I could remember the name of the developer, but they're a home builder that built like 30,000 homes a year in America. They're putting in 200 condos, and they got permissions to put in these condominiums, these twin houses, and sell these twin houses. They took them a year or 12 months or something to get their plan. And the market, they got their interest rates very low. The interest rates are moving up. Buying power is moving down. This company has decided to build those 200 units and rent the 200 units and hang on to them for 3 years, which completely, these would have been homes. These would have been $100,000, $300,000 homes, $200,000 homes that would have provided for first-time home buyers and second-time home buyers. But the market is so screwed up. This company is keeping those properties and is going to rent them, creating a further crisis. So everything you're saying, John, is absolutely true, and everything you're saying, Lana, is absolutely true. And the markets are being manipulated by these profiteering capitalists. And
Another.
Go ahead.
No, sorry, Steve. Finish what you're saying.
What I was going to say was we paid the taxes to bail them out,
Right.
to do this to us. Go ahead, John.
The other issue that's interesting is, again, this weekend financial review. There's an absolute crisis with the housing available in Australia. This isn't the required housing. People are living in their cars. People are living in tents in a developed first world country, supposedly. And the estimate is that there are 10,000 homes that are not available for rental because they're being used for short-term stay, Airbnb and comparable. So where these homes would normally have been there available to rent for families that need them, they're not available now because the owners can make a bit more out of them by using Airbnb short-term stay situations. So people are living in their car, they can't get a house, and these houses may sit there empty half the time, but the time they're rented out provides a better return than if they were in a full-time rental. So again, technology is being used to create crazy situations.
Interesting.
I have a short comment. Bitcoin comes to mind.
Yeah, I was thinking about that.
To thinking about how decentralized money will behave. And a big question for me is that the money game is not very old. I feel that like we're just starting to learn how the economics work. Like when I was taking a look into Ray Dalio's video of how the economic machine works, that was like eye-opener for me. And I'm thinking like that machine works because we keep printing money. What happens when Bitcoin is no more, there's no more Bitcoin mining Bitcoin, so it's going to be like the gold, like your limited resource. I am very curious about that future, so just wanted to add that comment.
On Bitcoin as well, talking about Bitcoin and the other digital currencies, I was also interested to find out this week, I didn't realize this, that one of the ways that the North Korean economy is continuing to function is that the government employs huge teams of hackers who steal Bitcoin. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars a year of Bitcoin stolen by North Korean hackers.
Oh my God.
With government training and support, and the money that is stolen is traded outside of North Korea and provides currency to keep the North Korean government functioning.
That's amazing.
No.
That's
But
incredible.
it just shows the naivety of us today in not really being inclined to understand and to study history. I mean, Julian, you say the money game is young. It's not. I mean, money has existed for millennia, and it's always been the same. Debasing, whatever form it is, debasing, cheating, and then going out of use because people realize that it's being debased. I mean, that you have young guys who's grown today, they know nothing about the real thing. I mean, you see a guy, you say, okay, in your house, there's a plug. What is the principle of functioning of a plug? You know, of current, he doesn't know. You know, he has a phone, and then there is this money printing thing. That's called digital currency, right? And it's always live in one phase. But just think about it. What do hedge funds do in life? Do they have an ideology? Do they have a feeling?
No.
No. They live on what you call speculation, and they make money that way by arbitration. If there is momentum, there's a possibility, and they know how to trade up and trade down, arbitration all the ways. So that is one of the things that is just technical. But from the point of view even of the essence, John, you just gave the example of people being able to steal, right? The blockchain itself might not be breakable, but your wallet is breakable. I don't care because you have a Bitcoin, you have 5 Bitcoin somewhere in the wallet. If I can break into your stuff, I will get your code, one way or the other. That is another problem. And the third is that of the fiat power of government, right? Organizing in complex society means surrendering part of your sovereignty to an entity which is representing the group. And for some reason, that entity is tangoing with you in a democratic way when it's a democratic regime. But in some many ways, it's just autocratic and exercise that power in that way, in a blunt way. And there was always that risk that it could be outlawed, right? That is, the individual will be faced with the choice of abiding or becoming outlawed. You just need to be declared. You say, Joe, you are a crook. It doesn't mean that you were really a crook. It just, to be outlawed being by law, by fiat power, Joe is declared outlaw, and that's it. So there was always that risk. And there is the whole kind of growing up into what we call one phase. There is this Bitcoin that is going to create, there is this Ethereum, there is this whatever that's going to create whatever I need in life. And we just come into the harsh reality that the forces at play are playing at their rhythm. And they are playing whatever game that they're playing, which is not necessarily the game that we want to play. That's what I want to say. And there is one word here that Bucky says here, science and technology operate economically and socially only as slaves of the most powerful short-sighted cashiers of humanity's needs and weaknesses. The latter see less profit in organizing the business of humanity to survive on the energy income of the environment.
Like, Bitcoin now depends on the energy. If for some reason the world turns off internet because we're out of energy or of electric energy, then Bitcoin dies, you know, like.
No, I mean, it's even worse than that because mining is very energy devouring. And people talk about these currencies without ever thinking much about how does it cost to mine. It takes a lot of power to do it. And that power, whatever you want it, will have some other bearings in terms of environment, in terms of what energy source is used and things like that. That's it. Everything is enmeshed.
Hmm.
Just to, at a meta level, this reminds me of Operating Manual Spaceship Earth, where he talks about the great pirates that are actually, extracting resources, from everyone else. And this has a profound impact in coming up with solutions, so that we don't necessarily. The other problem is that we're not seeing the total cost of solutions as well. That sometimes we come up with something, and he uses the example of desalinization in there. He says, desalinization in and of itself, people will say, oh, it costs too much, or it costs too much in energy, or things along those lines. But the real costs are really not known to us. And and I think actually in a similar way, that exists with digital currencies as well, because there are other efficiencies that could be gained by using digital currencies. There's other forms of energy that would actually, the efficiencies may outweigh some of the energy costs. It depends. I haven't thought about it from that perspective. But the important part that point I'm trying to make is a lot of these pirates, these that were slave to the most powerful people, whether it be politicians or financiers. They make it impossible to come to some reasonable or to an optimum solution to some of our most pressing problems. And resource, it ends up impacting our overall resources to a certain degree. So, shall I continue?
Yes.
Okay. Realization of mutual success by all mankind is frustrated also by the now entirely irrelevant and invalid inferiority or failure complex of world around behaviors of humans, conditioned exclusively by 2 million of years experience with major failures of mankind, as well as with vital inadequacies of vital necessities, plus the ages-long, seemingly obvious, and seemingly inevitable fact that the vast majority must die at a relatively early age, either through starvation, disease, superstitiously governed human sacrifice, capital punishment, war, or dueling. As a physical evolution whittled down the numbers surviving to match the numbers supportable by the ignorantly and only opportunistically exploited, ergo only short-sightedly and meagerly organized world resources. The analogy to the wasp's dilemma occurs in humanity's long-conditioned reflexively superstitions assumption that man is, with only divine exceptions, designed to be a failure. The normal human has always been a potential and a probable failure. At an early age, the average human acquires a powerful inferiority complex from his exposure to his parents and his childhood community deeply inhibited culture of misinformation and misfortune. The deep-seated proclivity of humans to gamble their monies is founded on the working assumption of human consciousness that individuals are inherently programmed for failure, and that only cultivated luck can divert the individual from his negative flight.
What is
Okay.
flight?
What?
Can we comment on that before?
Please.
Hmm.
No, I'm just inviting thought and comment.
I have a question about the last word, like plight? What is that word?
Plight is suffering. Suffering condition.
Oh, okay. Can you scroll a little bit?
Sure.
So to read that again, please.
Yes,
Thank you.
no problem. Were you going to
Well,
comment?
I mean,
Yeah.
Bucky's theory is in general that there is evolution and that the understanding and education, right, is meant to improve the odds, and that the assumptions before were false assumptions. Remember the type 1 and type 2 evolution that we discussed some time ago,
Yes.
right? Type 1, you're just doing things in the dark and for wrong reason, arriving at some discovery, isn't it? Type 2 is more organized, more principled evolution. So if you assume initially, because of local condition and things at that time, that there is, say for example, that the resources are limited, then that also kind of influence very heavily the paradigm in which you evolve. You are more prone to arrive at certain conditioning because you're ignorant. I'm talking about as a society, yes, John?
More than ignorant, we are conditioned by our beliefs. One of the most powerful examples I know of the limitation of beliefs. I mean, who can believe that an Olympic gold medalist would not be giving their best? And yet, if you think about the history of the 4-minute mile, up until about 1955, 1956, Olympic gold medalist after Olympic gold medalist runner failed to be able to run a mile in under 4 minutes because expert after expert said it was a human impossibility.
That's true.
And then I think it was in 1956, Dr. Roger Bannister, an Englishman, ran a mile in under 4 minutes. And in the 6 months after he did that, about 10 other athletes did it. It wasn't a limit to muscles or anything else. It was a deeply planted belief, planted by the experts, that it was a physical human impossibility to run a mile in under 4 minutes. The moment somebody did it and proved that the belief wasn't real, other athletes did it. But up until then, Olympic gold medalist after Olympic gold medalist couldn't do it, not because of their training, not because of the limits to their muscles, but because they'd been given a belief. And we have been given so many beliefs. And this is what Bucky's saying. It's our beliefs that limit us. It's the belief that we can't do it that stops us doing it. No matter how hard we try, we can train at an Olympic level. Until we discover and remove the belief, we'll never succeed.
Yes.
That's an excellent example.
So,
Excellent.
And the paragraph that follows is very telling, from the analogy to misinformation and misfortune.
That's right.
It is very, very powerful. If
Very
I can
powerful.
repeat, let me read it for you, Joe, so that you can comment on it. I'll be very interested to hear what you say. He said the analogy of the wasp's dilemma occurs in humanity's long condition, reflexively superstitious assumption that man is, with only divine exceptions, designed to be a failure. The normal human has always been a potential and probable failure. At an early age, the average human acquires a powerful inferiority complex from his exposure to his parents and his childhood communities, deeply inhibited culture of misinformation and misfortune.
Yeah.
They say the deep-seated proclivity of humans to gamble their monies is founded on the working assumption of human consciousness that individuals are inherently programmed for failure, and that only cultivated luck can divert the individual from his negative plight. Cultivated luck, inadvertently making a discovery for the wrong reasons. Remember that in evolution type 1.
Mm.
Can you bring
It's not
more into
verbatim,
that?
but the idea is that you're doing wrong things, like something like the bumblebee. The bumblebee help to create life by, for example, by spilling radially flower. It helps plants kind of multiply from where they are at the distance. During the flowering season, the bumblebee will come to look for nectar. While looking for nectar, is going to flap its wings, and flapping its wing is going to cause, how do you call it? Plant seed.
Like this.
What is the word?
Spore, the
Okay, there's a word for you. You understand what I'm trying to
Yeah.
say? To disperse radially, and by dispersing radially, it will allow kind of insemination or whatever, multiplication of plants from a place where the bumblebee was doing its thing. So for the wrong reason, another plant germinated. From the bumblebee's perspective, the bumblebee was just doing his own thing. Whereas evolution type 2 will become like anticipative, because we understand the general principles or a little bit of something. So we can organize ourselves to improve the odds. It's no more we can improve what we call the probability of success. And that's why utopia is possible by design. Questions and comments?
I would like to comment because connecting all the ideas that you have mentioned, like I really like what you told at the beginning of the previous intervention about evolution, similar to education, in which in a way that is increasing odds for us, and working with this, reading this last part where it says like working assumption of human consciousness are inherently programmed for failure. Like education, the learning process is based on failure. If you don't if you don't learn to fall and stand up again, or to make mistakes with numbers or writing something or drawing something, then you don't learn. Like you can have all the theory and that doesn't make sense. And this cultivated luck is kind of doing that in the moment that you needed to use that. So I can learn how to swim, but if I I don't know, I have an accident in an airplane and I need to swim because it was in the middle of the ocean, like it's going, me, in my luck is that I was able to learn how to swim before that happened. So I think that there's something that we can like all of these are connected, you know, all of this, like the misinformation also and the misfortune also is connected with that. And like the superstitious is something that can help us. Like I believe we all have like this spiritual side, and this is like connected to that luck, you know, like to seeing that in the future. So many things come to my mind when I read again and read again this paragraph. I don't know if you have the feeling about the divine exceptions, that that is something related to also religion or to people who
Spirituality. Yeah.
like they consider themselves an exception, or they consider some other people like these people were an exception, and maybe it is true or it is not true, but we can think of it in that way.
Well, I mean, the divine exceptions, I mean, it's interesting. Because it's kind of transcends what we believe to be true. So, or possible. So there's that aspect of it. And I think philosophically about those things. You know, the writer Kierkegaard or somebody like that would talk about, you know, or even, you know, just this, you know, the idea of something, how do you transcend the rational thinking that human beings limit themselves with? When I first read this paragraph, I thought of a couple things. I thought of like just this idea of bounded rationality that exists with Herbert Simon, the economist. I believe he was out of Carnegie Mellon, of what we think is possible, and then how do you transcend that? And I thought John Butler's example was really spot on with Roger Bannister, how people thought that the 4-minute mile was absolutely impossible. And then once it was proven to be possible, that everybody was able to break through it. This is also bearing out in a lot of, shows you just how powerful our belief systems are, and how they can be both limiting, but they can also be, you know, they could also be, you know, change the way we look at the world. And this is also proving to be the case with things like cognitive behavioral therapy, where their beliefs, it's focused more on how you frame things and how you look at things and how you look at things objectively, as opposed to looking at them through a lens that is of misfortune or misinformation. So anyway, those are just some thoughts that I had with this particular passage.
But I think it's unfortunately that Anne is not here this week.
Yes.
But it talks to us in terms of design, because where it is, what and when. What, you know, because this talks very much to education. So what education and when or where that education. I think that it talks to the education. If there is anything to do in terms of education, really urgently, is to attack it at the base of it, at the youngest age possible. So that Yeah,
That's
because if you left the limiting beliefs of those things, really, if they are left to consolidate, it takes as much energy to undo and redo. That is twice. So that's what, that is a measure of the gravity being locally twice more powerful than radiation. You remember that formula? That gravity locally. So if youths, let's say a cohort in a certain place of young people, babies that are born, and they are born with beliefs, if they are left to 13 years, right, to teenage in certain belief, in order for them to change significantly, it will probably take as much energy as that was used to build him for 13 years to undo what conditioning was done first, and then another energy to build up in a different direction. So that is quite powerful. I think that what Anne is doing is quite laudable and should be encouraged, that the type of wide radio education is emphasized on youth at the earliest possible.
right.
A teenage is almost too late.
I agree.
Would you agree that with this process of education that you have just described, that we can build our own luck, or as Bucky says, cultivate luck?
Luck comes to the prepared. You remember that saying, luck manifests to the prepared.
Luck
There's another metaphor that we've been seeing. Yes. There's another metaphor that we've seen, is that life forward is like a movie. You have a reel running and you have a window to see, and it's moving like this. If the shot that you want is passing and you're distracted, you will never press on the pause to replay and replay to understand what it is. It will pass. It is fleeting. It's just a metaphor for the notion of luck. Because things are, remember, they're swirling around you, and you yourself, you are actually vibrating or navigating at a certain frequency or frequencies in life. And then we see all of these patterns. And if you are not aware, that is educated, that is drawn from in out, you will never spot it. You will never. And things are happening whether you want it or not. They're happenings and they're events. Just because of energy in universe. Always emotion. There will always be events. There will always be things. Now, discovery of it or awareness of it, something different. That is you now working towards being prepared to be able to watch those or to see some of those whenever they occur. I mean, you can have, let's just take an analogy. You build, let's just say that, assume that we are the society of the most advanced, and we build this telescope that is the most powerful. If nothing is happening, will you see anything?
No.
I can have the most powerful telescope that I want, and I'm scrutinizing and gazing the horizon, whatever. If there's nothing happening, that doesn't depend on me. I won't observe anything. That's another manifestation of what you call duality. So those things are always happening. That could be from our perspective, from our standpoint, be qualified as luck or happenings that have impact positive into our living or on our living. But if we not prepare for that, probably we even resent it, we'll be annoyed by it, or we just, for us, like most of the case, we just believe that nothing like that ever happened. So we condition in certain way. So the best we need in terms of design to decondition, we have that task. And the sweetest spot to deconditioning is at the youth, at the childhood level, to have an impact. It's the largest impact that you can have.
Is the analogy? I'm going to check if I got the analogy right, like about duality with the telescope, because if I got a telescope that allows me to see through one planet over there, and I have the power to see like what is happening inside that planet, and I'm able to see something happening, then I will be able to see that and conclude that there is something happening in that planet, right? But if I do the same thing and what I see is that nothing is happening, it means that it doesn't mean that that in reality there's nothing happening, but maybe is that I'm not seeing it. So the duality is when you are seeing what is happening, or the duality is something that shows you that there is existing, that's outside, there is something that is existing. Like, how do you consider those two cases? When
Let me clarify, Julian. You see, duality is a general principle. I didn't say generalized. Is a general principle. Gravity, radiation, they are there everywhere, independently on me. I'm just a consequence of the application somewhere. I'm submitted to the laws of gravity and radiation, whatever. Now, my thought, the me or the we can think. We have brain, we have mind, right?
Yeah.
And then we have to have, well, our principle, our evolution of that of increased awareness, isn't it? Increased awareness of things that are happening there. But our design is a design that is meant to be anti-entropic. Do you get me?
That is designed to be, what was the last word?
Our design must be anti-entropic.
Anti-entropic?
Yes.
What that means?
Anti-entropy.
Yeah, Joe, you explain what anti-entropic is to me?
Anti-entropic meaning not chaos. So there's order that's instilled. Is that a good explanation, I guess? Yeah.
I would say say is not even organized. You know, like anti-entropy. Entropy is radiation, right?
Yeah.
Anti-entropy is locally creating a system that result into a pattern that result into a pattern. An example that I can take is you have a fall of water, right? You are in the Amazon or in the rainforest, and there's this mighty river, and there is a fault. Water is falling, right? So this water is radiative, isn't it? Its energy is scattered. Now, if you build a dam, right, before that fall, if you build a dam, or at that fall, you build a dam, you are storing water in a certain reservoir, right? For a use later, that you open it and you drive it through turbines to change energy into electricity, to transform what you call the gravitational energy of falling into a turbine that turn and inducts electricity that is transformed and be used for those purposes. That construct of a dam and putting an hydropower plant there is anti-entropic.
Got it.
It will be organized for a while, but ultimately it's going to be demised by entropy because it's submitted to entropy. You get what I'm trying to say? Your dam will last, I mean, some of the oldest dams, maybe 100 years or something, but it will eventually be recycled. So our designs are anti-entropic. Like the house where you are, that room that you are, that environment is anti-entropic. But whatever, if you don't maintain it all the time, it's going to be how do you call it? Let's call it destroyed. The elements are going to, what is the word, Joe?
Destroyed? I mean,
No, yes. It's going to wear. It's going to wear away.
okay.
It'll break down.
Yes, it will break down.
It will break down. Yeah, totally.
So the whole thing of Bucky is one. You always say you start from the macro, right? You start from the general. So by starting from the general means that your consciousness were high there, general. And then you come to the micro. So if we were building, let's just say now in terms of the way we think, if we are conscious that stars must exist, that is our assumption, then we will build to satisfy ourselves that that is true. We will strive to build telescopes that are powerful enough to make us see and measure what we assume. Therefore, there are an element of teleology that creeps into the way we design. Does it make sense?
Of theology, you mentioned?
Teleology, yes.
Teleology. Okay, teleology.
Teleology is about, like, say simply, the ends justifying your action now. You get what I'm trying to say?
the ends who's justifying your action now? That what do you mean?
Okay, we're designing a telescope because we want to observe stars,
Yeah.
right? That is teleological. Our design is teleological.
Okay.
We are building photo PV cells on a sheet because we know that photons from the sun are bombarding us all the time. We want to capture it. That's why we designed that. Otherwise, we'll design something else.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a long way trying to clarify. I don't know if I've clarified, I've misled you further and confused you further, but it was to answer your question.
No, that's really helpful, Manu, because in this way we are in this universe that is constantly leading us towards entropy, and what we're doing with anti-entropic, it's amazing. Like, yeah, I never thought of the opposite of that. Like, yeah, I thought we were always going to go into that direction of outside, like wearing out, of disorganized. But knowing that we can use our knowledge to build this kind of anti-entropic systems is just like clarifying of that duality. And that doesn't mean that if we believe something, then it's going to be an assumption, as you were saying. And that's it. Like, that's what that's something that we got to work on with that assumption, and that is what it's keeping us evolving. So yeah, thank you, madam.
I've just put in the chat the definition of teleology from Wikipedia.
Oh, there we go. Thank you.
Phenomena in terms of purpose. Then cause. Okay, that's helpful.
And I've used the word teleology only in the context of our design.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. So you see, yeah, you see that the objective, the object, and the cause now are put together, because general principles, the general principles is the cause. The macro is the cause, because the cause of this, the cause of a fall is gravity, for example.
Yeah.
That I know. Then I take that, there is a fall, then I know that electricity exists, and I can produce electricity from that. That is the logical. That is, I'm going to design my coming radially into it. Now it is design that is going to propose, that's going to result into a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I mean? You know that your body needs resources in order to be healthy.
Yeah.
Now you are going to choose the input into your body. You choosing those is teleological, is because you know that by ingesting them, you are going to improve the well-being of your body, isn't it? It's by design. Okay.
And there's a decision in there. Like, which purpose are you going to choose? And if you don't choose it, like, the universe or whatever happens is going to choose for you, you know. Like, I can use my energy for, I can choose which, for example, which food I'm going to eat, or which information I'm going to feed my mind. And what purpose, that is something that I can do. The same as with electricity. I can use electricity for different purpose. So it is like a decision implied. And I like that.
Well, you have to make decision every time. There's nothing,
Mm.
you know, the pursuit of veritas. If my purpose is to pursue veritas all the time, I make choices. And it's not linear. Sometimes I make a choice that takes me 2 steps into this direction. And I'm making another step that circumvent and then bring me back in relation to where I was before I took the first step. So that's the way it is.
True.
But you understand what Bucky is saying is that because you cannot repeat the happening that you have appropriated because of ignorance, then the only way for you to make it appear like it is something, or you are anointed or whatever, is either by force or by indoctrination, right? To keep people in the dark.
To keep people in what?
In the dark.
In the dark. Yeah.
Yes. It is hours appointed by God. Right? Because you seize something that happened to you, you realize that it's something that put you in a position of advantage, and you want to preserve that position of advantage.
Mm.
Okay, let's continue.
Yeah. Shall we continue?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. One reason why humanity in general loves, admires, and worships human babies is that all physically normal babies are both unblemished and are designed to be physically successful. They are swiftly blemished by man's ignorantly served love. If despite his millenniums conditioned, failure-prone complex, man is to survive on the planet Earth, he must be educated to assume a new norm for humanity. Because of the facts of world society must now assume the normal man is designed to be a success and the universe designed to support that success. For as we shall presently see, a man is essential to the success of universe itself. If humanity on Earth flunks out, humanity on other planets will probably carry on to perform the uniquely human anti-entropic functions essential to the total regenerative evolution of universe. Shall I continue?
Or? Yes, no, comments and questions. This is comments and questions. To me, is very important in what is Bucky's belief in terms of the why we're here. And also, are there humans somewhere else in the universe?
That will be carrying on human activities.
Yes. And you see, for the first time reading here, we hit on the anti-entropic functions.
Right.
essential to the, yes. So for him, human has a very unique and specific role that is macro, micro, in terms of the universe in which we are.
Mm.
It's like we are the stitches of the little imperfections, local imperfections of a well-oiled universal machine. Do you understand what I mean by that?
Not exactly. I'm going to be honest. No.
Okay, all right. He's saying, he talk here, I think that if humanity understood the universe in which we are,
Hmm.
then we will realize our unique role of playing local in a way that is anti-entropic for a certain and teleological, because our role is to assume anti-entropic function essential to the total regenerative evolution of the universe.
Mm.
Mm. Okay, that makes
That
sense.
seems to be what he say our function is the anti-entropic functions that we're talking about. Let's take what we in our short lifespan were experienced. Right. John, the steam train, right? Then the gasoline train, then electric train, then the, how do you call it?
Levitating.
Magnetic, how do you call that, Joe?
The
The magnetic, you know, when the train is evolving,
Levitating.
the least
Like,
friction.
is it levitating?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Right. In each of those kind of segment, we had a function, we had a role. The role was to either perfect it or to realize that it is so harmful that it's got to be dismissed. Right?
And dismissed in this particular instance would mean not using, not.
It's
Not
less
to-
efficient, is harmful.
Okay, that's fair.
Why was it? Why are we no more using the steam train? You remember, you know, Joe, you wouldn't remember, but John knows what the steam train is. You had a train on the rail, on the track, running, and there were actually guys shoveling coal
Oh yeah,
into
I've seen it.
the furnace, right? And you could see sparks, you know, as the train was going and billowing all of this dark soot and dirt around. But we were happy because we had pristine environment, and then there was a train. It shaped a whole generation. But living it, we, by measuring, by feeling, realized that it wasn't that good. And something else was designed that was better, less impact, and we adopted it. We discarded that one. And that is evolution. But if we abdicate that role, something else will take care of it. So our anti-entropic role of supporting the total, locally supporting the total regenerative evolution of the universe would be dismissed, isn't it?
Right.
And discarded. Okay, that was my comment.
Anybody else have any comments or questions?
Mm, the thing that caught my attention was when anti-entropic functions essential to the total regenerative evolution of universe. When you were explaining the water, how water falls, I was also thinking that the water under earth was going to then be used again for something. So it has like a cycle of reuse, you know, like it's going to start again. And what we're doing with building systems, like building machines or building dams, is that we have a way to do that in the moment, instead of waiting for many years for that to come back. And right now, like, this sustainability movement tells me, like, are we the only ones that can think of a way to regenerate what we have used? Because, I don't know, a bee, for instance, who pollinates, is that bee thinking of how to regenerate flowers because they're doing that job for them with the pollen? Or is that something that they came like with evolution? And that's what caught my attention right now. Like, what are the things that we can regenerate, that we are regenerating thanks to evolution? Like, maybe this anti-entropic is the thing that is giving us power to do stuff that no other species can do, as far as we know in this world. Like, there's maybe a hidden answer there. That's what I'm thinking now.
But, let me just come in here. First, that example was just a metaphor for us to understand the dualities and the anti-entropic functions. That was a metaphor. The second thing is that it seems that humans are the only, call it species, currently, that seem to have been designed to just be a generalist. That is to develop the capability to how will I say, to integrate things experimentally for purposes that are more and more general. Everybody else, I mean,
there are more
a lion in the jungle, in spite of his strength, will never go and dig a well. He can't. It is specialized in a certain environment. We were able to deploy or to be deployed all over the earth because we have the capability to adapt or to build anti-entropic devices or construct that allows us to adapt to a large variety of environments. Right? If we went to the pole and we are Eskimos, we have skins and we could make fire or whatever that is to survive, to create a semblance of warmth in an environment that was completely hostile. Right?
Like,
under the equator in Colombia, where it rains a lot, we can build sheds to be under shade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I'm thinking now is that, yeah, look, you can see humans in different, very different environments, conditions, jobs, or tasks, doing different tasks and integrating different kind of things, and they can choose what to do in which case. But for instance, a lion cannot choose to do something different than what a lion does, because if he stops doing that, then by nature he's going to not have success, you know. Like if a bee doesn't want to be a bee, wants to do something different, like they're not going to survive, right? Like we as humans maybe have that possibility to use our environment, our conditions, our tools different, and in that and in so many different ways that makes us
What is to choose according to you?
the purpose.
No, what is to choose in a systemic way? What is to choose? What do you decide? What do you say to choose?
Well,
What are the assumptions of choosing?
Deciding.
The question that you're asking is, what are the things that we can choose from?
What is to choose? Essentially, what is it? I want to reframe it,
like what
within
is to choose?
our discussion, our systems.
Like, what is that word meaning into this thing that we're talking? So choose is like if you're an Eskimo and you make a fire, like you're choosing to use pieces of wood to make a fire, but you can choose to do something else in order to survive, you know. Like you can choose to move to somewhere cooler and somewhere warmer, sorry, and that way you don't have to make fires again to survive. That's where you can choose.
Okay,
but
let me say
lion
it
cannot do that.
anyway. Yes, to choose stems from dividing and putting aside part.
Putting aside what?
Part.
Side part.
Apart.
Yes. Let me repeat it. To choose stems from dividing and putting aside part. And the wider your boundary, the more possibilities that you can divide. Right? The more you need to be generalist to understand all the interactions that are going on in order to discover patterns. If you are a specialist, you see less in extent and deeper. But following what you call a connection of linearity, just in that sphere, in that dimension. This is very important. So you cannot decide without understanding. And we understand by dividing. That's why we use the term derivative. Another, yes, another significant, another explanation of derivative is that something in light of something, a face of something. you've divided into different faces, and you can see that face.
Okay.
All right. And that's why Bucky started this paragraph that we were reading with saying, you know, scientists were specialists.
Yeah.
And by specializing, they can only be captured by those in power.
Right.
So for as long, if they don't cooperate, right? But if they cooperate in a certain way, then truth, veritas, progresses.
Right.
Or our pursuit of veritas improves. And we no more prisoners of the myth, of the beliefs that keeps us in the condition we were.
That's why education helps you to
Exactly.
be more independent.
Yeah. Start.
It's
You say-
intended to.
Yeah.
Is what, John?
It is intended to, but traditionally, our education model was perfection.
Right.
You will learn your maths and you will get 100%. That doesn't equip you for life. Good education now involves the discovery model. You will be given the skills to research and study and explore and learn, rather than the teacher having all the answers, giving you the information, you memorizing it, and then relying on that. That's an out-of-date model of education.
I agree.
I mean,
Please,
it's not that the model education that we have today stem from the General Board of Education that was founded by what was this, the name of the rich, one of the barons. What was his name? American. Rockefeller. Rockefeller.
Okay.
Rockefeller is the founder of the Board of Education, the General Board of Education, as we know it. That said, they captured the Industrial Revolution, they had fortunes, they needed specialists to man the factories. And then therefore, you needed to normalize education into this general education, and then. In order to perform efficiently the defined functions that specialization required. You get what I'm trying to say? And then we've kept it. You know, it hasn't essentially changed in 100 years. That was, I think the General Board Education came in either in the 1890 something or the just about the same time as the Reserve, the Fed, the Federal Reserve was put in place.
Yeah.
Even before that, the origins of our education system followed the French Revolution. The Germans, following the French Revolution, introduced compulsory education. They took the children away from their parents and they said the government will educate you, and they introduced a system of schools designed to produce factory workers and soldiers. And then, of course, the German education system had a very big influence on the American education system. In the early days of the United States, many academics went to Germany to study. But as you say, the idea was to produce people with the skills to fill the needs of the employers, not to encourage the yearn to learn, a lifelong thirst for knowledge.
Yeah.
No, that's absolutely true. Which is, you know, kind of gets back to this idea where this conditioning that we were talking about a little bit earlier, and that's what happens in schools today. You're conditioned to be good employees. You're conditioned to be, you know, good citizens, whatever that's whatever that is. You're not necessarily conditioned to have like metacognitive strategies for you to continue to learn and explore things in a more sincere way. So
Manu, are we going to wind up?
why don't we get started with winding up here. Julian, my friend. How do you
All
feel?
right.
What would you like to take away from today? Would you take away from today?
Thank you, Joe. Actually, I'm feeling hopeful. I think many of the things that we have talked today are showing a really deep understanding of where are we right now. You know, like we were able to talk about economics, about the education, about evolution, about technology, about science, about the specialization. How is that like learned lots thanks to all the stories that and the analogies that Manu was explaining. So I am grateful. I'm feeling grateful for that also. And I think that this all of these can have a very good purpose, and that's what I think we all share here in this call. So that's really what I think it's making me feel hopeful, I believe. So why don't we go with you, John? How do you feel today? What do you take away?
I feel concerned for much of what's happening around the world. We have crises at every level, from environmentally to politically. We look at the state of the United States at the moment, we look at the state of Europe. And it's good to go back and connect with the genius in each of us that Bucky was aware of. And it has reminded me again of the importance of encouraging every one of us to have confidence in ourselves and our own genius, and to get in touch with and discard the limiting beliefs and the belief that we are already failures that's been given to us at many levels. If the world is going to survive, then it requires every one of us to be tapping into the potential we have and using it to contribute to a better future for the planet. So, yeah, provoked a lot of thoughts, really worthwhile. I'm glad to be here, a small but select group. I'm not sure what happened to Steve there, but anyway, he's gone. So I'm glad to be part of it. I was a little late arriving, but glad to be here for what I was here for. So Manu, how do you feel? What do you take out of today?
I feel encouraged, and I feel grateful that, you know, we made it. It's a commitment to be here, this space, you know, from 4 continents and communicating effectively. Yes. Yeah. What I get here is the value of education, a deuce to draw from, to allow our minds, and the minds especially of our children, to explore the largest possible and to experiment. I also take for our personal, for me, a personal commitment to lifelong education. And the third is action from decisions, from enlightened decisions. Bold action from enlightened decision. We need to do something. Each and everyone in his environment. There's no point us coming into this meeting and still living the way we used to live before. We each have to use the power of exponential to help in the most way, be humble enough also to receive from the environment where we are and from the world at large without bias at first, right? In order to progressive evolution. That's what it is. It might be maybe whimsical, it might be very ambitious, but that's where I'm vibrating this morning. And I'm very thankful. And also to Steve, to Kelly, I wish him no more problem now, recovery, for sure, we're with him. Susan, and I don't know where they are, but I'm sure they will agree with us that we really need to be actors of change in our environment. So that's the way I feel, that's what I take away.
Would you say
So
that
how
the
do you feel? What do
responsibility
you-
is part of responsibility is part of what comes after learning?
Yes.
Yes.
So Joe, how do you feel? What do you take away?
I feel good. I'm a little bit run down. As I mentioned in the beginning of the call, I'm dealing with a little bit of a headache. So, but this call always helps me feel better. And so I'm very, very fortunate to have everyone here today. And you know, the interesting thing is that we started talking about, you know, how people extract resources from the ground and our financial systems. And we went on to education. And I think education is a way of kind of countering traditional forms of thinking that allow for systems to be extracted from. I think without education, then that allows for what, you know, Bucky had called the great pirates, as he said in Operating Manual Spaceship Earth, to continue to exploit systems and people. So I think we also have to accept that there are people in the world that want to dictate what we learn. And I think that's you know, that's kind of that's something we have to work against if we're ever going to get to a place where we're fully we're making the world work for all of humanity, as Bucky would say, and that way we won't have to rely on people or on other planets to do our work. So I think that it was interesting. It was very interesting call, because I think, again, the way it gave us the problem and the solution in this particular instance. So,
That's
you
a
know,
good conclusion. Yeah.
yeah, so it really did. It was yeah, it was, hey, there's a problem in the economics aspect of it, and the solution is education. So and I think that that's what we're doing each week on this call. So and I'm glad, you know, I'm always happy to have everyone here, but that, you know, I hope Kelly's feeling well, and I know Susan's working hard, and I know Steve dropped off, but I know he works hard every week as well. So and thank you, Manu and John and Julian, for being here. So I'm grateful for tonight's call. So that's it. So good night, everyone.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye.
Have a good Sunday. Take care.
Happy Independence Day, Joe.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Yes, I will.
True,
Yeah,
true. Happy
yes,
Independence
Monday.
Day for the
That's
July.
right. That's right.
All
Take
right,
care,
all
everyone.
right.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Bye bye.